but not going anywhere. That's the effective status of the United Nations observer mission in Syria. The 300-strong unarmed observer force targeted at least 10 times before it suspended its tours on Saturday to venture out into the field. It says it needs both sides to stop shooting. Activists claim 3,300 lives have been lost since those observers deployed to Syria at the end of April. The Red Cross this Wednesday launching an appeal to be let in to besieged neighborhoods of Homs. Those observers part of just about the only thing that the West and Russia have agreed on when it comes to Syria, the Annan peace plan. And at the G20 summit, the disagreements were again there for all to see. But beyond the public rhetoric, there are back-channel talks to find common ground. The French president's even suggested a new mission for those observers. What that mission would be will spell out in the debate. Can the outside world come together and prevent what some call the growing Iraqization of the conflict, involving outside weapons, outside logistics, and even fighters? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking what's Plan B for Syria? And we're pleased to welcome longtime Syrian dissident Haitham Mana. Thank you for being with us here in our Paris studios. Also with us from the University of Oklahoma, Joshua Landis, whose Syria Comment blog this Wednesday describes the UN mission as a catch-22 situation. Thank you for being with us. Ole Solvang of Human Rights Watch, welcome to the show. And welcome back as well to Paul Valley of Sciences Po, the French Political Science Institute. Thank you for being with us. We'll be joined shortly by Walid Fares, who's special advisor to U.S. presidential candidate Mitt Romney and who teaches at National Defense University. The France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and also on Twitter. You can find us at FrancoisF24. Yes, we're talking about Plan B when it comes to Syria, even though nothing else for now is officially on offer.
There is no other plan, no other game in town. There's no Plan B. So the six-point plan of Kofi Annan remains the reference, the framework for a settlement of this dramatic crisis.
Joshua Landis, is there a Plan B?
You know, there isn't a Plan B. Nobody wants to invade Syria in either like Iraq or like Libya. Syria is too big. It's in the middle of a civil war. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have money. It's going to need a lot of help. But everybody is worried about getting in, so they're staying out. And the world community is divided, and that means that Syria is increasingly becoming a proxy war, as we're seeing with better arms getting in. And now it's these helicopters versus, obviously the rebels still don't have the kind of arms that the government has, but they'll be getting better arms. I think we can feel assured of that in the not too distant future, because the West is trying to change the balance of power and feed the opposition, starve the regime. Obviously Russia is doing just the opposite and continues to feed the regime along with Iran. And that's where we are.
Haitham Mana, do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I think that there is what we can call a rebuilding plan, Kofi Annan, but not B. B, that's mean change everything. And because...
And change everything by force?
Because the idea of the force and the idea of friends of Syrian people, the idea of this conference for one side against another side, failed. Kofi Annan come as a good solution, a global solution, with all members of the Security Councils. And now we don't have the right to go back. We must go on in three levels: in structure, function, and program of Kofi Annan. Structure, we need for at least 3 times more people as observers, and pluridisciplinary specialities, like expert in explosive. We need also medical, legal physician, and we need also human rights experts.
But everything you're describing hinges on the shooting stopping, and that's not the case right now. Neither side has stopped shooting.
No, for us, we try to keep Kofi Annan alive, but with the capacity to do well the job, not with the old manner. With the old one, we cannot go on. They failed. We can say that with 300 people, you cannot do a lot of things. But if you change and you give them the capacity to be everywhere, and also the capacity to observe and to protect people, they can do a lot of things. And Kofi Annan now is accepted by a majority which never had for other any solution proposed for Syria.
Oli Sylvain, do you agree on that?
Well, I think that the problem has really been that nobody has been able to spell out what would be the consequences for a failure to implement or to abide by the Kofi Annan plan. And first and foremost, that of course relates to the government. This conflict, like many other conflicts, is very complex. But first and foremost, it has been driven, and it is driven by the human rights violations that we're seeing on the ground. We see that the massacres, the widespread and systematic use of torture, is really part of what's motivating the opposition as well, and motivating opposition fighters. I've spoken to many opposition fighters who tell me that they joined after they had been detained and tortured. And so I think that the key part of the key to the solution to the problem here is for the international community to also be able to spell out what will happen if there is no implementation, if the Syrian government does not abide by the Kofi Annan plan. And the problem is, of course, Russia. That Russia has been blocking all these efforts at the Security
Russia's
Council.
the problem, but is it the only problem? When I see, for instance, this statement here that read out by the head of that UN observer mission, saying the government has expressed very clearly, the Syrian government, in the last couple of days, that it's willing to let down on the shooting. I've not seen the same clear statements from the opposition yet, he says.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is, of course, yes, that both sides have been violating, what was the ceasefire, the Kofi Annan plan. I think there is no discussion about that. The fact that the government now says that it's ready to abide by it, I'm not sure. The government has never been good at following through on its words. So I think the solution is to look at what the actions are. If the government is serious about abiding by it, then it should stop the fighting, and then we would expect the opposition forces to do the same thing.
We've seen that, as we mentioned at the outset, there's been a spike in killing the last couple of days, particularly startling this Wednesday in and around the central city of Homs, under siege now for 10 days. The International Committee of the Red Cross are making a plea to both sides so they can get in and bring some relief and evacuate some of the wounded. Paul Valley, when you look at those images from Homs, do you have a sense that the UN observer mission has done anything at all to help?
Well, it's a question we might have raised even a couple of months back when the UN supervisory mission over Syria was set up as well, because of course there was footage of fighting of the same intensity at the same time. The hope at the time with the Annan plan was that it would reach probably more than just a localized ceasefire for the evacuation of wounded. What they clearly expected was a general downturning of the violence. At the same time, one had to be pessimistic already at that time. First of all, we've reached this number of 300 members for UNSMIS. Even at the time, it wasn't even sure that enough countries would contribute enough people for this mission. And 300 is indeed a very small number, 300 unarmed members as well for a fighting which is extended on a variety of different theaters all across the country in very different circumstances, with also, of course, different situations that are in the border regions where you also have the problem of the refugees in Turkey and in Jordan. Jordan, with also, of course, the possibility that this could also spill into Lebanon, and there's sporadic fighting there too.
Joshua Landis, you describe it as a catch-22 situation. Why is that?
Well, because the UN is damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they withdraw now and there's a big massacre, they get tons of mud on their face. If they stay and they don't decrease the killing, then everybody carps at them and says they're doing nothing. They are bearing witness, and we saw that with Hula Massacre and others. They got to the massacre site, even though it was delayed because they were shot at great danger to themselves, and they gave us an account of what happened. That's important. Obviously, this is a fight in which both sides still believe that they can win, and for very good reason, because they have international backing, they've got arms, they've got every hope that the balance of power is going to change in their direction. And this is why the UN is in a terrible position. The international community has been divided. It didn't know what to do, so it sent in the UN. It's always what you do when you have a failure to sort of come up with any plans. And unfortunately, the UN was sort of hoping that the situation might change while they're there, that the two sides would want to come to terms, but they don't. They think they can win. This regime is extremely narrow. If Assad leaves from the top, the entire regime is going to crumble. Russia knows this. The people in Syria know this. There is no really halfway ground. And the opposition knows it. That's why they will only negotiate with the government when Assad agrees to step down. And at that point, everybody, this whole regime is based on loyalty and loyalty to a family. When that's gone, things collapse. And so, unfortunately, we're locked in a situation where both sides have reason to believe that they can win in the long run.
Haitham Mana, you heard Joshua Landis there. Remember a couple of weeks ago they were banting about this idea of what they were even calling the Yemen variant, where you could maybe make Assad go away but keep perhaps the old structures. Joshua Landis says you can't do that. Once Assad goes, the whole thing collapses. Do you agree with that?
I think that we need a Syrian solution. The Yemen example is not very good for us. It is a good in the idea that we can find a solution with a part of the state.
But do you agree that the whole
army.
structure of the government of Syria hinges on Assad and his family?
The most important things now is not the person of Bashar al-Assad.
Well, it sounds like it is, according to Joshua
But
Landis.
the group around him. If you take, I give you names, Hafiz Makhlouf, his brother, and if you take Asif Shawkat, if you take Rustam Ghazali, these people are really what Max Weber called groupement d'intérêt militaire,
Right.
the military bloc which keep this structure in power. And if they keep these people, you cannot do anything. Bashar is very weak near them, these people.
All right, and we're pleased to be joined at this point from Washington by Walid Fares of National Defense University. Walid, thanks for being with us. At this point in time, we're discussing how the standoff is continuing between both sides. Joshua Landis making the point that both sides think they can still win it. We are wondering, though, when you look at the players at stake here, could the UN in any way right now, under its current mandate, be doing more?
Well, first of all, for the first proposition that both sides, both camps on the ground, still believe that they can win it, absolutely, I agree with the doctor. The regime believes that as long as there is no internationally led campaign a la Libya in Syria, there are no reasons for why they cannot withstand the pressure of the opposition. That's how the regime thinks, because in addition to the fact that they have a very large army, they have the support, the strategic support of the Iranian regime, of many politicians in Iraq, and of Hezbollah. That's their view. So short of a United States-led or a UN-led real campaign on the ground, not observing and monitoring, real campaign to bring down the regime feels comfortable so far. But the opposition also feels that the regime is never going to go back to what it was before. I mean, they're not going to be a Hama 2 like it was from 25 years ago. The opposition believes that with time there's going to be an erosion of the armed forces, an erosion of the regime. And with time, they're going to be a much wider coalition, international coalition, that would bring down Assad. Now, answering your previous question quickly, in Syria, there is an understanding that if Assad goes down, everything goes down. Not everything goes down. The central government, yes, of course. But if Assad goes down, all depend on how he goes down. Is he going to go down by going to the northwestern part of Syria and creating his own Alawi bastion? Or is he going to go down by a coup from the army? A lot of scenarios that are possible.
Ole Solvang, when you look at how this is evolving over time, and you heard Walid Fares there mention how really both sides are looking at how this is playing out over the medium term, and we've been talking about how in the short term the killing has spiked. How much has the situation changed since April, and have things really gone the way you predicted they would?
Well, I think what we saw immediately when the UN observers came on the ground was that there was a reduction in the number of killings. It didn't stop completely, but there was a significant reduction. Just before they went in, the numbers were around 100 or more per day, and then it went down to 20, 30, 40 per day at least. But we've now seen a significant increase as well, and particularly in the last week or so, with what seems to be a renewed offensive, particularly from the government, but also renewed attacks from the opposition. Again, coming back,
and with both sides here thinking again that they can win it. Does that make the UN observer mission a moot point? Because no matter how many observers you send out there, is there any reason to sending them if they know they're going to be shot out either way?
Well, I think Landis made a good point. I think we have to recognize the very difficult security situation that they are in, and I don't want to second guess their assessment on the ground. But I still think that there are very important things that they can do on the ground in terms of the human rights monitoring, in terms of being the eyes, the international presence on the ground. I think we've also completely forgotten that one of the points in the Kofi Annan plan was the release of political prisoners. So far, of course, the observers have asked for access to detention facilities to verify whether political prisoners are still there. The government has not granted it. But there is nothing in the security situation, there is nothing about the continued fighting that would prevent the observer mission from conducting visits to detention facilities in Damascus, for example.
All right, so that would be a good way for the regime to show its good faith. We'll pick up on those points and more when we come back here in the France 24 debate.